Hi, my name is Julie Lawson and I'm CEO of Rains Institute. And today I want to talk to you about the Great Resignation. Now that is exactly what it sounds like. It is a mass exodus from the American workforce. It hasn't happened yet, but it's happening. So we saw a peak of people who have actually left their positions in April of 2021. That's when it peaked. And we expect another peak approximately fall, perhaps early spring of 2022. But what's more alarming than those who have left is the number of people looking actively to get out of their current positions. And that's at about 71% of American workers. That's according to a Monster.com poll. There's other polls that say it's a little lower than that, but nonetheless alarming numbers. The reasons they cite for leaving their jobs or wanting to leave their jobs is a variety of factors, including more flexibility, the ability to continue to work remotely, perhaps better pay. But number one is burnout. And I want to talk about that today because it's really important to understand how we got there and perhaps what we can do about it. So let's talk about how we get burned out. Our brains don't know how to process change in a very rapid manner. We can take very significant organizational changes and look at them over the course of 3 to 5 years in terms of adjustment period. So if we know it takes that long for a group of people or even an individual to really truly embrace a significant change in their life, imagine what happened to all of us when we said, you're going to have to make several significant changes, including working differently, perhaps changing your product line or your service line to adapt to the current world situation. Your children maybe homeschooling, you might have elderly parents you're taking care of. I mean, there's so many different things to consider that we're changing all at the same time. And we said you have to do this in a matter of a month or two, or maybe not even that long, depending on our circumstances. So we immediately had to adjust to several different changes happening simultaneously in our lives. So it stands to reason why our brains couldn't keep up with that. That is no fault of anyone's. That's simply what happens when there is a crisis or a mass event that occurs in our culture or in our society, such as a pandemic. So what we're seeing now is the inability of our brains to really play catch up to those changes. And we can do it for short amounts of time fairly well. But when we sustain those changes and we don't have an end in sight, or we adjust to the new changes knowing we have to go back to the old way of doing things, we become overwhelmed. And our brain sort of hiccups in this space of trying to adapt to the rapidity of these changes without having a reasonable amount of time to process what it means for us to make the changes become more permanent, to change habits. All of those things take time, and our brains didn't have that luxury. So when that happens over a sustained amount of time, that's where trauma can begin to sneak in. And so we are seeing absolutely signs of trauma in the workforce, in our culture, in our society, worldwide. That's not restricted to any one country. It's just what's happening with the pandemic. When you experience things like a loss of concentration, an inability to plan effectively, feeling, sort of like checking out or burned out or exhausted all the time, or you feel like you just can't really deal with everything that's on your plate, those are signs of trauma. That brain fog that we get is a sign of trauma. So all of those things have snuck into our lives over the past 18 to 24 months of this pandemic, sometimes even unnoticed. And we're wondering why we don't have the energy to really keep up with our lives. What happens when our brains become susceptible to trauma is we start to seek escape. That just makes sense. Of course, our brains want to check out from what's really happening in our world. The ways that we want to check out, of course, are limited to what we can control. So when we look at our lives and you think, well, maybe I'll make a family change. Well, we're not going to leave our families. We don't want to do that. Or we'll think, I want to make a change of where I live. Well, maybe that's not possible right now due to the housing market or to the pandemic limiting our ability to make such a substantial change in our life. So what's the easiest way? It's our jobs. That's one of the easier ways that we can make a substantial change in our life, feel like we have control over something, and execute that and feel like, okay, now I've got control over this situation that's been happening to me. I can make this change. I can get a fresh start, do something new, and I won't feel the stagnation that I've been feeling for the past 18 months. It is an emotional reaction. Not only do we know that it's an emotional reaction, psychologically speaking, but we know that it's actually not being effective. Many of the people who are leaving, 80% in fact, who are leaving their jobs are not more satisfied when they get to the new job. So if only 20% of people are saying, yeah, this was the right move for me, we know that the rest of those people were making maybe a knee-jerk or emotionally based response to other factors, including the trauma and the exhaustion of being in a pandemic. What that means is that gives us some power in terms of knowing how to address that problem and perhaps keep our best talent at our companies. The first, of course, is to share that information, to say, can you hold off making this decision because you may not be making it for the reasons that you think. Perhaps what you really need is more control over your professional goals or what's going on in your life or the projects that you're managing. So let's talk about ways you can have more control and adaptability to the things that you have to do for this company, for where you are currently. To talk about the impact of the current status quo, the shortages in workforce, the supply chain management issues, all of those things, to talk about them in real and vulnerable terms. So to sit down with our employees and say, we get it. We're not going to ask you to just go do your work. That's your job. That's not what we want to do. What we want to do instead is say, we understand this is difficult. We understand this is challenging. I don't have the answers maybe that you're looking for. The next step is to together develop those answers. So what will it look like if we don't go back to quote unquote normal in the next few months? What is our next plan? What then becomes the permanent solution or the new normal for us? So helping define that with our employees, giving them that control to have a say in what happens in their life and how they execute their day-to-day work goals is going to be paramount in giving them that sense of control and feasibility, and make it feel as though maybe they don't have to check out in order to adjust. The next thing I want to recommend is making sure that all of your mental health and wellness services are in top shape. If you need resources, I am more than happy to help with that. You can make a comment below, or you can visit our website at Reins Institute. That's REINS, ReinsInstitute.com. Let us know you're seeking how to better help your employees in terms of their mental health resources and wellness. We have to be adjusting that right now, especially with leadership. Don't underestimate the impact it's having on you and your leaders and the owners of the company and so forth, as to what this pandemic has done in terms of the mental wellness and adaptability and resilience of our workforce. And so we do need to make sure that we're providing our employees and ourselves with the right resources and ability to be flexible and adaptable to this environment. The third recommendation I have is to keep some of these pandemic changes. If we know that flexibility and the right resources and the ability to continue to work from home are playing into why people are looking for jobs elsewhere, if that's going to end, why not keep it? I have talked to many managers who've said, because that's not the way we do it, or I like seeing people in the office, or that's just not the way it's done. Those aren't necessarily the right reasons not to implement some of these changes full time. Now, I do understand the productivity argument. And what I will say is I would like us to give that a little bit more time. In other words, people will say, I don't know that my employees are as productive at home as they would be if they were sitting in front of me in the workplace. That may be true. There's about 50-50 research out there that's, every time I read an article, it's we're more productive and the next one says we're less productive. What I want to say about that is let the industrial psychologists have enough time to measure that during quote unquote normal times. Right now, our brains can only handle so much information, so our productivity would likely drop anyway, no matter where we were working, or no matter what kind of changes would have happened in the workplace. Our personal lives have changed significantly enough that we've got a lot on our minds and a lot on our plates. And so we have not been able to really adapt to that. Once we can adapt to that, we will get a better snapshot of how we are being productive outside of the workforce as well as inside the workforce in a way that just feels a little more normal and adjusted to what our minds can normally handle. So I want to give that a little bit more time. If you've been able to maintain at least moderate to good productivity throughout this, consider making those changes permanent. I know that that's your choice. It is certainly up to the individual company, but I will say that people will continue to leave if they have had that flexibility or that ability to work on their own terms for the past 18 months, and you are now removing that option without really good sound reason to do so. Some good sound reason, there are plenty of organizations that really do need to be in the office and on site to get the job done. I get that. But if you have that flexibility, please consider continuing to do that for the foreseeable future so that employees will have more reason to stay there. And the final reason, or the final piece of advice and insight I would like to give you is what we know about gratitude and praise. When employees leave, morale is usually the reason they're leaving. This is in normal circumstances. Right now it's burnout, but normally it's morale anyway. So they're looking for feeling included in a workplace. They want to feel like they belong, like they matter, that they're purposeful, that the work they do actually does contribute to a greater whole. If we can talk to them about that and say, you are appreciated for being here. Here's what you're good at. Here's what I appreciate that you do every day. Here's the contribution you're making to the workforce. Here's the purpose that you fulfill. That kind of language and sharing those thoughts with our employees is going to be paramount in keeping them where they are, because they will start to realize, I don't have to leave. I don't have to go anywhere else. I can find new ways to do some fun or interesting things within this current environment where I do make a difference, where I do belong, and where I'm supported by leadership. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of making sure that your employees know that they are wanted, that they are appreciated, and that they are making a good contribution to the workforce. That may not sound like a big action, and it's actually very simple to do, but it matters a lot in terms of how people determine whether or not they're going to leave and go somewhere else. So hopefully these tips were helpful to you and a better understanding of burnout and how we get there. And what I'd like you to do is if you like this video, subscribe and also add any comments in the comment section that you'd like. And of course, at any time, if there's something that we can help you with the Great Resignation, with morale, with any sort of issue around communication, emotional intelligence, or resilience in the workforce, we want you to reach out to us, and that's at rainsinstitute.com. Thanks so much.